No, I'm just like, I guess that, like...
Yeah, give her space.
It's okay, Katherine.
There you go.
I guess that, like, you know, I'm really strong as Katy Perry. Then sometimes I'm not as strong as Katherine Hudson, and like...
And Katherine doesn't have to be strong.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Robert Duff. I'm a clinical psychologist and an author, and today I'm going to be reacting to another one of the therapist videos. This is by Viceland, I guess. From what I understand, these videos have been recorded for a while, but they've been re-uploaded recently. And ever since I did the Corey Taylor from Slipknot video, which you guys had a great reaction to, I've been getting a bunch of suggested ones in my YouTube suggestions, and Katy Perry keeps popping up. So we're going to be doing The Therapist with Katy Perry. This is a licensed therapist who sits down and essentially does a real therapy session with a celebrity, typically a musical artist in this case. So if you guys want to get the full version of this, I'm going to obviously have to edit this down so it's not like an hour-long video. But if you do want the uncut hour-long video, check out my Patreon. I'm going to be uploading sort of the unedited versions of these with all of my reactions, not necessarily the shorter YouTube version of it. So if you join any tier of my Patreon, you'll be getting access to that. And the Corey Taylor one of those should be up by the time this video comes out. So check that out on Patreon. And otherwise, I want to be breaking down a little bit of his technique, you know, some of the things that I see that are impactful in the session, and anything else that comes up. I'm going into this one completely blind, so I've never seen this before. So let's get into it.
My name is Dr. Siri Satnam Singh, and I'm a licensed therapist. This week, I'm sitting down with a young woman who came from a religious upbringing to become one of the most famous singers in the world. This is Katy Perry.
So keep calm, honey, I'ma stick around for more than a minute. Get used to it. Funny, my name keeps coming at your mouth, 'cause I stay winning. Name up like swish, swish, bish.
I have been in therapy for 5 years, and...
Sit back, relax.
Okay. Well, it's changed my life.
Yes, so we're gonna...
Just one thing to keep in mind with these, like, so you see the frame right here that they're in, but they're in a studio. There's people all around. This is a weird situation for a therapy session. So Katy is instantly in interview mode. She's used to doing these press interviews. She's used to this environment, but not used to settling back into really, really accessing her feelings. So the therapist's job is to do a really, really quick rapport building, meaning building the relationship, breaking down some of like the nervousness and those barriers to get to the deeper stuff. And that's a challenge in this setting. This is sort of like therapy on steroids. You gotta go through it really quick. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out.
Call you Katherine, right?
Yes, Katherine.
Katherine is here. Katy's gonna take a rest for a minute.
Oh, thank you so much. I just like, that's what I'm trying to do, is to be seen as Katherine Hudson sometimes. Well, a lot of
Yes.
times.
Yes. When does Katherine come out and play?
A lot. When Katherine comes out and plays when I'm with my sister and my family. But when I can just rest and relax and kind of like fall and surrender, that's when Katherine gets to come out, because sometimes, you know, I built up this Katy Perry thing that everybody knows and is fantastic, but it's more of a facade than it is a real.
It was very...
You could hear it in her voice, you know, like she has this like, you know, upturned voice that is projecting her character of Katy Perry, you know, like I think that's similar to her real voice, but you can hear sort of the difference. And we all have identities that we build in ourselves. You know, sometimes I'm Robert, sometimes I'm Duff, sometimes I'm Dr. Duff, you know, and we all have these like sort of identities that we build up. But for a celebrity, that gets really, really distinct. You know, the identities get really distinct from each other, and there's you in there for each of those, but you have this mode you kind of got to switch into. Imagine, you know, being a performer and having to be on every night, you know, so like for instance, say you're on tour and you have concerts. you're doing concerts night after night after night. For you, this is your job, and you're performing these things, each night. But for each of the people there at your concert, this is maybe their first time or the only time this year that they get to see you. So it needs to be the best experience for them. But for you, it's another day at the job. So you need to figure out some way to get yourself there and be able to perform as if it were your most important concert every time. And so that can kind of fuck with your head for sure.
Interesting. Did you notice your behavior? And Katie.
Oh, yes, my behavior, yeah.
And then Katherine sat back in the chair.
Yes.
So Katie gets a lot of attention, doesn't she?
She sure does. Maybe almost too much.
Yeah. So we were talking about the 4 primary archetypal presences for a woman.
Yes.
And Katie, we're going to give her some attention today,
Sure.
is the priestess and actually a goddess.
Thank you.
And
Worked hard on that one.
Okay, so I talked about this in the last reaction video for the series, getting into archetypes and things like that. I'm assuming that this guy comes from like a Jungian background, so Carl Jung. If you read into things that he wrote early, this is sort of early in like psychoanalysis and that whole realm of psychology, and he talks a lot about archetypes, sort of the collective unconscious in these sort of figures and avatars that we all gravitate toward and draw from. It's something that I have certainly read about and had experience with, but it's not something that is central to my personal approach, though I do think it's interesting. And I think that if that is sort of the way the person's brain works that you're working with, it's cool to dive into that territory. But this therapist is very centralized in that. He's brought it up in other sessions that we've seen.
Katherine is the self. And Katherine may be going underground a little bit. Katherine is the one that maybe has feelings that are not really acknowledged, expressed.
Or evolved.
Or evolved.
He's doing a good job of giving her space. I said this before, but in the other reaction video, but he does a good job of putting something out there and not rushing to fill in the space. So, he's going at a nice slow pace, checking her reactions. In this case, she just jumped in and added to it, said, or evolved. In other cases, she's just sort of nodding along and being there with them. And that's okay. You don't need to do things rapid fire in a therapy session. You have time. Sometimes an hour can breeze by when you're doing a therapy session. Sometimes it can feel like the longest time ever, but you have time to get to these things and you have time to let things unfold. So you don't need to feel as a therapist rushed, even though it is easy to do so because if you're not used to it, silence can feel awkward, but silence is important. That's the time when you're processing, when you're waiting for those thoughts to come and things like that. And just another note, one name for what he's doing is called parts work. So the different parts of yourself, working with those different identities you have and how those play out. And sometimes the job is giving voice to one or the other. Sometimes the job is sort of trying to integrate them, but we'll see where they go with that.
Katherine, growing up, well, I love my parents.
Yes.
And I grew up with a lot of born-again Christian beliefs. And so I had people around me, like-minded people like that. And I would say that it was a bit of a bubble, although I don't regret or think I could change anything.
I want you to feel what you're saying.
Yeah, so he's picking up on her, the touch and go, she's still in that interview mode. She's like, well, I would say this and this. And this is somebody who's been in therapy for a long time too. She said she's been in therapy for 5 years or something like that. And so, you do get used to telling your story. And sometimes it can come across as rote when you're meeting somebody new. You're like, okay, well, here are the greatest hits. Here's what happened, etc. Especially if you're used to doing it in interviews and such. And he's picking up on that. So they're still trying to get, on the same wavelength.
Okay. I don't regret or think I could change anything because I know I can't. But it wasn't always that easy because, it was very strict. And I was a very curious person. And the curiosity sometimes it wasn't allowed because you had to have faith. So it was hard for me sometimes to be curious about what was going on in the rest of the world.
So I'm hearing Katherine was even underground in your childhood experience.
Maybe. My parents I love, and they did the best job
And we're not going to pathologize your parents by no means.
No.
But we want to deepen into Katherine and Katherine's experience in growing up in that family, in that environment. And so what I'm hearing is that you had these maybe fundamental or rules.
So what he's doing right now is he's addressing the affect, the underlying, feeling behind what she's saying. So there's the fact of what she's saying, which is, I love my parents. They did the best job I can. Things were kind of strict, whatever. He's saying that he's taking a shot at identifying the affect underneath, which is you've always had some experience of having to split yourself, to kind of subdue certain parts of yourself while other ones are brought more to the forefront. There have always been different parts of yourself that couldn't always be in the forefront. So he's trying to identify that affect, and he's going to see how that lands with her, if he's hitting the mark.
That is partially why I started singing, is to pop my own bubble, to get out of my own situation.
What were you trying to get out of?
I guess I was just trying to get out of one way of thinking.
Okay, what was that thinking like? I don't know anything about it.
It was.
He's pushing her, right? It would be tempting to say, okay, this is obviously what she wants to say about it. This is enough of, she's saying enough here. She's not going deeper than she wants to, and he's challenging her. He's basically acknowledging that, okay, you're not lying to me, but you're not quite getting there yet. So he's sort of playing, not necessarily playing dumb, because he is ignorant to what she's talking about. He doesn't want to make assumptions about what she's talking about, which is very important. So he's gently encouraging her to go there, to go deeper, because he knows there's something else there.
The client splits off their unconscious onto the therapist. I got very sad.
Interesting. So that is something called countertransference. These are the feelings that the client generates within you. So transference and countertransference are terms that are used from psychoanalytic therapy, and that is what I'm seeing is his background. So transference is essentially the client treats how do I say this? And I'm taking myself back to school here. The client sort of projects certain people onto the therapist from their past. So they get a certain reaction from the therapist, and in turn, the therapist gets a certain reaction from them. So in the room right now, they're playing with the feelings that are happening. So he's saying, I am feeling feelings of sadness. And that is him describing the countertransference that's happening in the moment, how this is affecting him. In my own therapy sessions, I've said things like, when you talk about this, I'm getting their urge to jump in and try to protect you. What do you make of that? And so you can talk about the feelings that you have in the moment between each other, and that can help clarify things that are going on either within their psyche or things that have played out in their life before.
I had some sadness when you were talking about that. I don't know if you're able to feel it, but it was split off to me. Am I connecting to something?
Yeah, a little bit.
So I'm hearing that there was the adaptive personality. You had to adapt to your environment.
But I loved all of it, but I always just felt like I was called for more.
What if I'm gonna make an assumption here? This would, if we were in therapy, if I was in therapy with Katy, this would be me kind of throwing out an assumption, seeing how it lands with her. I feel that one of her defense mechanisms is intellectualizing. Telling the facts of it, telling the story of it, and keeping it surface level. The therapist is trying to work really hard to pull out that affect, to connect to the emotional part. And she's resistant at this point. It's only been a few minutes into the therapy session. And this is presumably their first time meeting. So totally understandable. But her defenses are still up. She's still, you could see it in her eyes where she's, kind of playing back some things. They're getting a little bit twinkly, but she's not connecting to it yet. And so he's working hard at it.
But Katherine is still carrying some...
Well, it's not going to happen.
You call the word for me. What are the feelings?
I guess it's not going to happen in one day, right?
No.
It's gonna be a process, and that's why
That's what therapy is, a process.
It's no destination.
You're processing.
No, I'm just I guess I guess that, like,
Yeah, give her space.
It's okay, Katherine.
There you go.
I guess that, like, you know, I'm really strong as Katy Perry. Then sometimes I'm not as strong as Katherine Hudson, and, like,
And Katherine doesn't have to be strong.
you know, people like talk about my hair, right?
So this is a good example of how giving her that space got her there. You know, like I think her defense, as I said, is to be intellectual and maybe a little hyperverbal. You know, to kind of fill in the space and talk and, you know, explain things. And sitting with thoughts is a different story. You know, and so giving her space and letting her, you know, she's looking up, kind of wistfully thinking about these things that are starting to drum up, and he's just letting her get there. And so now she's accessing some of that emotion, which is good. This is what we want in this style of therapy. This isn't necessarily like coaching. You know, this is accessing that deep stuff, and that's what he wants to get to.
And they don't like it, or they wish that, like, it was longer. And, like, I so badly want to be Katherine Hudson that I don't even want to look like Katy Perry anymore sometimes.
Okay.
And, like, that is a little bit of why I cut my hair, is because I really want to be my authentic self,
Yes.
like 100%.
I
And
understand.
so it hurts, you know, when I don't feel like I can.
What a mindfuck to have to feel like you've traded one set of expectations for another one, and for the outlet that helped you grow past these limitations in the past, that has become a limiting factor, right? It is very interesting. Nice comfortable therapy shoes.
So, your fantasy and your curiosity created this great goddess. Your fantasy did that. Your curiosity did that. So you must give yourself, yes? All right?
Yeah, sure.
At the
I'm so blessed.
I understand.
I love my
Yes,
life, and I'm
yes.
so blessed, and I know a lot of people have.
Now that was interesting. You know, he's kind of saying, you know, you must give yourself some credit for this thing that you've built up. You know, I think he's understanding that she's already sort of connecting these dots and is not going to be necessarily super defensive and wants to keep going. In some cases, saying something like that might make somebody feel a little bit guilty, saying like, well, yeah, of course, you know, I don't want to make it sound like I'm being ungrateful or something like that, make them backpedal a little bit, which in that case, if they did, that's something that you could interpret and work with as well, like why they, you know, interpreted that as sort of a little bit attacky. I think in this case, he's just feeling that is something that he can explore with her.
Have given me this opportunity, and, you know, I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly.
No,
and I
no.
love my family and my friends, and I
She's
try
doing
and
a little
do
bit
my
of that,
best.
though.
Like,
So, for your,
so it's a bit hard to go back there.
can we say for your fans that you are presenting that you have the formula?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
But Katherine, who has a lot of hurt and unevolved feelings, I'm taking your words.
Something is very, very helpful. Sorry, Katie, that's a bad freeze frame. That's something that's very helpful to do is try to use the client's language. You know, metaphors they might use, language they might use. That's one way to sort of just kind of skip into their stream and keep going with them rather than being like convergent or divergent rather. And so, you know, unevolved is a word that she used, which is a very interesting word choice. So he's throwing that back out there and letting her pick up that ball and roll with it.
I want to be seen and heard, but, like, I want to be seen and heard for real, I guess. And I think everyone wants to be seen and heard. Like, people don't want to be seen and heard just because of the pictures they post on Instagram or the filters that they pick. Like, that's not the head that lays down on the pillow.
You know, I have a lot of compassion for celebrities. You know, a lot of people are like, what do you have to complain about? You have so much money, you can basically buy your happiness, this, that. And, you know, like, yeah, fundamental things are not a problem for them. You know, worrying about rent or whether to have this luxury or that, you know, insurance, all these things are just non-issues. And that's amazing. But, you know, celebrities cannot go out. Like, you know, they can't go to the grocery store. You know, you can't do normal stuff. And so it can be very, very isolating. And in order to have these one-on-one interactions, a lot of times it's with other celebrities or, you know, closely guarded people. And you're doing this in homes and in places that, like, you can't just like go out and freaking go bowling or something like that. That just doesn't work that way. It has to be a production. You know, you have to plan for it, and that can be exhausting, and it can be very, very isolating. And you know, you're also under that microscope she's talking about, and acutely aware that people don't want to hear you complaining. They don't want to hear this celebrity complaining about things, so they don't feel like they can voice that either. You know, so it can be extremely isolating, and it's sort of this thing where it's like, well, you want the success, but that comes with some stuff that's really hard to cope with sometimes.
But we always spend time developing the quality of the house. What about the quality of the lives of people living in them?
Yeah, of
That's
course.
what I hear you and that you're trying to do today.
Well, that's changing, Doctor.
Yeah.
So much happens in that house. That's the place.
If you began to give Katherine attention, what would that look like?
Really good question. Yeah, open-ended, right? It's in a certain direction. If you were to give her attention, what would that look like? So paint me that picture, essentially. That's a really good open-ended question to allow for exploration.
I think you're recovering your childhood. Katherine never got a chance to play because Katherine had rules to do. Yes?
Yeah.
Katherine couldn't play. Katherine had to, I don't want to use the word rigid, but would that be appropriate? Is that too strong?
No, I mean, it was a little rigid,
Okay,
yeah.
it was rigid.
So again, you know, throw out an interpretation, see how it lands. If it's not the perfect interpretation, that's okay. You can work from there. But when you say, you know, she didn't have a chance to play, you know, and you see this, like the breath catches, you know, the facial expression distorts unintentionally, okay, you hit a nerve, and that's something that's worth exploring further.
Yeah, I started turning pro at 11 or what have you.
So could you say that's perhaps the reason that a lot of the feelings are unevolved because Katherine's only 11?
Yeah.
You know, you hear about this a lot, not just in music and with celebrities, you know, but when people get into a way of life or an industry or something at a certain age, and it's sort of all encompassing, and they need to be different because of that, you do see these certain stops in development or pauses in development, at least in certain spheres. You know, certain parts of them are developing normally or beyond what you would expect. Certain parts are not, you know, and you hear about this a lot where people maybe like having kids at a young age is a good example. Sometimes when people have kids at a very young age, they essentially like lose part of their adolescence or part of their, you know, young adulthood. And so later on, when maybe the kids are grown, or, you know, the other situations where maybe it's a marriage and the marriage ends, whatever, you see these people find a way to reconnect and sort of have like the second adolescence or second young adulthood, because things really do sort of pause in that way. And so, you know, a person is not just one block of sameness. There's different elements to it, and certain aspects are growing at certain rates, other aspects are growing at different rates or stopped, you know. And so we're really, really multifaceted, and this is highlighting that pretty well.
But I'm a quick study.
You're a quick study, so now that you have the concept and the vision.
I believe that.
I think that they all teach me something,
So
you know?
you're maybe 16, because you've been dating.
I've been dating,
You've been
yeah.
dating.
But like, you know, I haven't found the person or figured out how to have, you know, a child with someone yet, but that would be a goal that I'd want in the future.
Okay.
But, you know, it was no one's fault. It's no
No.
one's fault. It's all just a lesson.
In some ways, as I said, you were multifaceted, right? In some ways, the development was slowed. In some ways, she probably had to grow up really quick, and intellectually, I think she's really, really bright. And a lot of people probably don't give her credit for that. She's probably not allowed to show that a lot because of the character that she is in public, but she's had to be very savvy, had to grow really quickly in certain areas. So you hear this sort of conflict between certain deep emotional parts that might be under-evolved or underdeveloped, but like broad, big concepts intellectually that she's been able to pick up on very, very quickly and very well, being able to acknowledge that even if things don't, quote, work out, they served a purpose, or there is meaning that you can make from them, that there are different kinds of love. These really things that take a long time for people to grasp and understand. So, there are different parts of her that are at different spaces in the timeline, if you want to call it that.
And then lastly, I like someone that's powerful. I like someone that puts all of that power into play, into action. But, and that's a tall order to ask for, especially for someone who's barely 16. I know, and like maybe some of it hasn't always been fair along the way.
Yeah. Talk about that not being fair. Someone that didn't get you, somebody that did not understand that Katherine is evolving and she's not where she would like to be. You don't have to mention the name. Just
No, I know,
yeah.
but I've had a lot of really nice ones, and one of
That was pretty good. Obviously something came up. He said, talk more about that. He led her a little bit more than I would have. I might have even pointed out what I'm seeing. I'm like, okay, what was that just happened? So you caught something. I saw a change in how you looked. What was that you're experiencing? What was that thought there? Who are you thinking of? Something like that, rather than doing more and more interpretation. Somebody who did this, somebody who did that. I would back off a little bit and let her lead me there. But that's a personal style thing.
what I would love is just someone that, maybe has done the work as well.
Yes.
Meaning like has dug deep, has pulled out whatever is not serving them in their life. They are a whole person, a healed person. That's what I want, but like I have to be that as well.
Yeah. So she's, like I said, she's smart, she's really smart, and she's desiring growth. She really wants to find someone that she feels like can help her continue to grow and learn, and I think she's aware of the parts of herself that she needs to become more aware of, and that's a really useful tool. Hard to sometimes get all of those things fulfilled, but I think she's very smart.
I have the image of a powerful man just like Katy, who's also 21. In his...
Sure, I got 5 more years. 5 more years.
That he's spent a lot of time in business, his career, making money.
I actually I just want someone that understands.
Understands.
And it doesn't they don't have to have money. They don't have to be famous. They just have to understand. And sometimes in order powerful, but sometimes to understand you have to definitely be in these fields.
But I could understand a man who was powerful who also hadn't developed his emotional self.
Yeah.
So what are you feeling now? What feelings are there?
That's a good way to check in sometimes. Simply just saying like, what do you? It's so cliche, right? Like, how does that make you feel? Whatever. But like, what are you feeling now? It's more about bringing it into the room in that moment. So what is this that I'm seeing? What are you feeling right now? It's a great check-in in the middle of a therapy session.
Relief.
Relief.
A little bit of relief. Like expansion. You know,
Yes.
like, I feel like it's not like some people are just gonna look and have a judgment, you know, and be this.
Who cares?
Who cares? I really can't control what they think.
No.
I never could.
Dude, she really, really, really just wants to be heard. Like, the countertransference that I'm getting is like, you know, like I want to give her a hug, you know, and I just want to like give her some space to talk and listen, because it sounds like she wants to grow and learn and do all these things for herself, but she also just wants to like be heard and like not assumed about and be taken seriously. And I feel like I want to do that for her, you know, just like let her be heard.
Well, sometimes I felt like, you know, I would have to like have a couple of drinks to go somewhere because I am Katy Perry
Yes.
out in the outside world. And so
Yes.
it would be hard, you know, to like be tired, or it would be hard to be like, you know,
Yeah.
it's always being on. So
So I was saying earlier, right? There's no normal going out. Like it's a performance, no matter what it is, and that can be exhausting. And so, getting yourself in that headspace, either through rituals or aids like alcohol, things like that. It's sort of like, well, I got to do what I got to do. Otherwise, I'm going to be showing up on social media next week and being talked about in a way that I don't want to be talked about because I'm trying to be normal. It's a lot.
sometimes I have to swallow things. And
Yes.
that's why I meditate.
Yes.
That's helped me. That's why I do yoga now.
Yes.
You know, that's helped me. And like, honestly, I'm in therapy with my family and it's amazing. It's so beautiful because like, my family gets to talk and be a family. And like, I get to hear my father speak, who I love so much. And I get to hear my mother speak, who I love so
Hear
much.
that pain there.
Okay. Just feel the love
Well,
and let it move through you.
and I didn't really hear them.
Yes.
And I'm trying to listen for them more and hold a space.
So if I were doing this, there's a lot of different emotions you can pick up on. Again, reflecting the affect underneath. I might say, I'm hearing, I think maybe regret, and I'd see how that sticks with her, because it sounds to me like she feels like she's making up for lost time or lost opportunity of not being able to hear them or connect, which is important for her because like one of her desires is to be heard, So I think this is really deep stuff for her.
To go online and
You
find
just
it.
mentioned two other risks for being inauthentic. You can internalize it and you become depressed. We've been there. Did you ever have some bouts to where Katy just didn't want to go on?
Yeah, I wrote a song about it.
Okay.
That's how I process. Is I write
understand.
songs.
And you get rid of those feelings, those
Well,
uncomfortable
yeah.
feelings.
Some of them don't come out
Okay.
fully, and that's why I still do the work.
Which song was that? What lyric comes to your mind?
By the grace of God.
Can you say a few of those lyrics? They're very close to you. They're very close.
It's hard, like I say, I get on tour, and it's hard because I'm ashamed.
Oh.
Because of course Katy Perry's so strong.
We're talking to Katherine. She's sitting back.
But it's hard because I feel ashamed that I would even like have those thoughts, I'd feel that low or that depressed, but
Shame, comes from expectations and feeling like you're not allowed to have these thoughts because you have all of these things. Depression does not discriminate. It doesn't discriminate between gender, race, your station in life. Certainly these are all factors that can contribute to it developing, but it doesn't discriminate, and it's easy to feel like it can compound on itself when it's like, okay, I have these feelings, but I'm not supposed to have these feelings. I'm not supposed to feel this way. So that can be tough.
Some of the rigid rules in your family are breaking down to where now they're a little bit more open system rather than a closed system.
There's feelings and communication, which are terrifying, I think.
Yes.
They were terrifying for us, maybe terrifying for other people.
Yes.
That's got to be a big leap to make, coming from the background that she just talked about with her family, to being open about things, right? Coming from a background of not being really allowed to ask questions, feelings probably weren't front and center. Feelings might have been considered selfish, to now let's go into the setting where that is the focus. It probably took some doing to get there, and it's really it can feel like a risk to suggest or start that process, but it could be so valuable.
And we are so close now, and like we're on the journey of healing, and I'm so grateful. Like, I love my family. I love putting pictures of my family up.
I've seen that the older that we get, we sort of relax a little bit more.
Sure.
We're not as rigid and doctrinaire and
with a lot of effort
judgmental.
on her part.
We want to be loved and appreciated.
Well, my therapist says something amazing the other day. You have one choice, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm going to get it wrong. To be right or to be loved.
Okay.
Do you want to be right or do you want to be loved?
Okay.
I just want to be loved.
Hey. We all do.
I can set aside all those ideas or things I think. I just want to be loved.
Were you ostracized or shamed or
Sure.
talked about?
Absolutely.
Talk about that.
Talk about that.
I loved learning, even in church. But and my mom and I, we have such a great relationship. And like, I used to sing this song in church called Come As You Are by Crystal Lewis.
Like the Nirvana song?
Who I love,
Yeah.
Crystal Lewis. And like, I feel like sometimes, like, the church does more judging than loving.
Okay.
And that's why it doesn't feel safe for me sometimes.
Okay.
And like, if I was to come as I am, how would I be accepted? Because this is who I am.
Yeah, so, with psychoanalytic therapy, you're looking at what sort of early formative experiences paint the way that you interact with the world now. And she learned from a young age that she can't be certain things because that's not right. So she can't come as she is, even though she's kind of desperately wanted to for a long time. And again, like I said, now she's kind of in this other scenario where she went from, you can't come as you are, to, oh, this is who I am. Let's build an identity out of that. But then that identity of Katy Perry turns into, now you can't come as you are either because you will have to be Katy Perry. So she's trying to find this reconciling in the middle of all of that.
Or this is who I'm developing into. So I think my mom understands that even more so now than
Yes.
ever.
So how do you know these days when the choice is going to bring the consequences that you want? Where do you go? Is it here? Is it here? Is it your staff? Is it your therapist?
It's a combination.
Okay.
It's a combination, but I try and go here. Because the head will just like,
Tell me about it.
it'll try and overthink the whole thing. And like the heart will just say, wait, patience, save his draft. Let the universe take care of it. It's not your job. Like, revenge is not yours, or what have you. Don't be so catty. Don't be such a troll, on the internet. Like, try and be an example. Be kind. And I have great people around me that I've had my whole career. And my sister and my brother and my parents now are great reflections of kindness and love and empathy. So it's a combination of things, but I really try and lead with my heart, which like is slow, too slow for everyone else. But
She's learned that she needs to give herself some space. When the emotion wells up, it complicates the way that you think, and you just need to give yourself some space, some slowness sometimes to understand how you feel about it and think about what you might want to do about that, and then go forward.
So what is that telling you?
My intuition, which is my heart, I think mostly right. In my mind, where does your intuition come from?
There is a meditation I learned where you develop your heart to develop your intuition. Have your sixth sense as your intuition.
So I have a little bit
But
of
the
some
two
of that.
together, oof. Yes. This is Katy's arena.
No, this is both.
This is both. Okay.
It's both, because if it was
Okay.
just Katy's arena, you would only see her in small segments, not doing this,
Okay.
not living life.
Great. Awesome. She was able to correct him. Again, like I said, sometimes you don't have to be right. You don't have to throw out the right interpretation. You just need to be receptive to how they react to it and go from there. So they're going to reach a deeper understanding than they would have if she just said, yeah.
Fully, because nobody needs to see
Thank
that.
you for correcting me. Because
No, it's
you
okay.
just evolved and I was holding the old paradigm.
No.
Where Katherine and Katy were separate. And you went there.
I want them both to exist.
Much to my
She wants to integrate.
surprise, and I wasn't even aware. You see how you integrated them? You're
I
saying
stood up for Katherine.
You could be a different configuration now, where Katherine is integrated.
Absolutely.
With Katy.
More heart. Freedom.
Oh, wow. Isn't that appropriate?
These are very much like, the cards are very much like a projective, what you would call a projective personality measure, like the Rorschach, or there's one called the TAT where you tell stories, but it's giving you a space to make your meaning out of it. I'm pretty convinced that she could pull out just about any card from there. And because she's in this mode where she is accessing those deep emotions in the way that she feels, it's going to hit her, and so freedom, she's going to pull something from that, and that's going to tie things together for her. So I actually think it's a great way to end sessions like this.
Freedom to be who you are.
Thank you.
I'm a little tearful. The rule is I shouldn't cry more than you.
So
I
it's
feel
countertransference. They're
your
connecting emotionally.
ecstasy.
That's okay. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to be a real goddamn person when you're a therapist. If something hits you a certain way, it's allowed to. You're gonna hold them and keep their information and do what you do as a therapist, and you're allowed to have emotions, and sometimes being honest about that is the most important thing for that person to hear.
Thank you.
Deep breath. Give her space.
I think we did it.
We got somewhere.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being
Appreciate
such a
you.
great teacher. I can keep
Yes.
this card, right?
That means I gotta be a whole other set.
I don't know. You want me to put
Okay.
it in?
Okay.
Take a picture, Internet Freedom. I want this one. I'm gonna send you another set.
Okay, fine. Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
I appreciate you.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's actually interesting too. Therapists fall in different camps when it comes to physical contact and hugs and things like that. Some people say, "Oh, don't hug your patients." Others are like, "Sure, go ahead, whatever." And I think that we're trained as therapists always thinking, what's the intention behind it? We're definitely trained to overthink things like that. I'm cool with a hug. I would not initiate one. there's a funny story from my training where in my training clinic, my like student supervisor was like, well, what do you do if someone goes to give you a hug and you don't want one? I'm like, that's not that hard to like just dodge a hug or, you know, give a handshake instead. And she goes, okay, stand up, let's do it. And she goes to hug me. And at the time I was practicing a lot of like martial arts. And so she like went and put her hand up and I went and like grabbed her wrist. And I'm like, okay, point taken. I sat back down. But these days it's like, you know, if it was a really impactful session and somebody needs a hug and I feel comfortable with that, I don't have a problem with it, you know, especially something like this. So, yeah. And I think we'll leave it there. This was a really, really awesome session. She's somebody who is has a pretty big emotional vocabulary from being through therapy for so long. I think that Katy is Katherine. I guess I should just call her that. Katherine, you know, is a really bright person and like very hungry for information. And this is something that was really, really meaningful for her. And so I think we saw a really great example of both therapeutic techniques, her being able to sort of advocate for herself and them coming to some really deep understandings, drumming up some deep emotion from the past, all that good stuff. So I hope you thought this was interesting. I really did. If you want to get the whole version, this was a 44-minute YouTube video that I reacted to. The reaction in full, probably well over an hour. The edited version is going to be a bit shorter than all of these. So if you want the full version, again, check out my Patreon. Any level of subscription is good for that. I'll upload the whole thing there. Actually, I ran out of disk space recording it halfway through, so that's how long it was. And if you want me to do more of these, please let me know what you'd like me to react to. These are really fun for me to do. Thanks.